Hi, good morning. I want to first thank all of you for your service to all of us here. When people ask me about Moms Demand, right, so my spiel is always, we are an all-volunteer grassroots organization that supports the Second Amendment but advocates for common sense gun legislation, like universal background checks. Universal background checks we think is kind of the most basic thing we can go for. I know in Delegate Boliva's survey that you sent out, 85% of people came back and said they were in support of it. Well, that bill died in courts of justice on Martin Luther King Day. And so I'm wondering, I mean, my Senator Peterson likes to say, right, a good idea will become a good bill. Maybe not this session, but sometime. So this is a really good idea. Most people want universal background checks. So I'm wondering what you can tell us that we can do to help you to get this passed.
I'm going to hog the microphone for the sole reason I got to take my son to basketball in about 5 minutes. So the question was about universal background checks. I think it's a bill that's gaining momentum. I think it's an idea that's gaining momentum. The bills need to be precise because there's also, one of the things that's critical to me is it has to focus on commercial transactions. And I'll give you an example. I grew up in a family where my father, his mother grew up on a ranch in Oklahoma. So, when she died, she passed on a couple 16 gauge shotguns, which I still have. And, I didn't go and report myself to the police when I took them into my custody. So it's important to focus on commercial transactions. It's important to focus on transactions that are not getting swept up in databases already. But the bottom line is, I think we tax commercial transactions all the time. We license commercial transactions all the time. I mean, obviously commercial transactions are subject to sales tax in most cases. So anytime you have a commercial transaction, people should be under the interested, and they should understand that, hey, this is a reportable transaction. And I don't think that's too much to ask. That bill, it came into courts. I think it was defeated on a party line vote. You have to, okay. But I think you had all the Democrats for it, and that included John Edwards, who represents, Roanoke County and Giles County, who typically is more pro-gun. And I think even people that are pro-gun are like, look, if you buy or sell a weapon, it's got to be something that has got to go through a background check. And so, right, and it's also, there are national databases. Obviously, the state police has their database. So the short answer is, and again, I apologize for sort of jumping in line here, but I got to leave. Is that I think it's gaining momentum. I think that's the #1 issue for gun control. The other one is obviously, the semi-automatic weapons, the AR-15s, which if you read my post on Friday, again, for someone who goes hunting with a 12-gauge shotgun, you don't need an AR-15. There's just no purpose for it. And I'll just leave it at that. Anyways, I just wanted to thank you all. I've got one last town hall at Sully on March 3rd with Delegate Delaney. But whatever my colleagues say is great stuff. So I'll leave it to them. But thanks to y'all. And oh, can I just put in one last plug? There was some talk about rate freeze, and I'm not going to be here to go to the details. But we've had a great ally on the Republican side, and his name is David Suderline. He's a graduate of Robinson High School. Okay, thumbs up. All right, thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeff. Just to further get into the gun issue, I've been, all of us have been trying different kinds of measures at getting sensible gun laws through since I've been in the legislature for 13 years. The strategy we've always kind of taken is let's throw a whole bunch of stuff up against the wall and see what sticks. Well, guess what? Nothing much sticks. I think what we need to do is to leverage the potential of elections in 2019 with some action in the session right before then and say, look, here's what is our core essential needs in gun control. This is the most science-based stuff that we're aware of, that's working in other states. Give us this next year, or after the elections, if the fortunes of war turn and my political party has both sides of the aisle and we have the governorship, look out. Because it won't be the 5 or 6 or 7, it'll be a whole lot of stuff that was thrown up against the wall sticking. Do you want that? Or do you want to take this kind of thing? And I'm in conversations right now with the governor's policy people on coming up with that kind of leverage strategy. It's what worked for me in bringing under control, to a small extent, the fox penning industry in Virginia. You know, do you want it declared animal fighting? Do you want 15 people from Arlington on the DGIF board? Fox penners, take your choice. Take Marston's bill or move on. I think there are ways that we can better leverage things rather than just throwing a whole bunch of bills up against the wall. We need to think a little more strategically.
Just one more thing too on this, and you all, you know, Moms Demand Action and so many other great advocates and advocacy organizations do a fabulous job, and I think you're doing it right in the sense that you're going door to door. You're knocking on our doors, you're talking to us, and obviously you're preaching to the choir here. But I think there's, you know, there's only a few issues, as I mentioned earlier, where we have made no traction, and this is one of them. I mean, none. I mean, if you can't support a sales tax exemption for the purchase of a biometric gun safe, where there is bipartisan support, and you do have support from the two different lobbies, you know, what to do? Well, as our governor says, if you can't change minds, change the seats.
Amen. Yes.
Two comments on throwing everything against the wall. Certainly in the last decade plus in the House, everything on the other side of the issue has been thrown against the wall. One bill after another that I can't believe gets out, gets passed. This year I'm going to say good news and bad news, that one of the bills that just left my head reeling was that you could get a concealed carry online. Now you can renew your concealed carry permit online, but you can actually get it. No face-to-face with any human being, the judge looking, asking a few questions, because that's arbitrary. And we're just going to go by the book of what you fill out the form. And we look at the unfortunate situation, which is then the second aspect of the tie-in with mental health. And my heart goes out because of all that I've done over many, many years in mental health field for those who both have mental health issues, and quite frankly, I think everybody does during your lifetime, that they're taking the rap, that we wouldn't have this problem if we didn't have to, if we need to deal with a mental health issue, then the gun issue will be just fine. Well, as it's been observed, there are many countries that all have the same kind of population makeup, and they don't have the kind of repeated massacres that we have. What we have is guns. Yep. So having said that, though, I also want to come back to that challenge. And that was one of the things that I was going to be mentioned that hasn't been mentioned yet. Good news in this session also was, we tried last year. This year, we have changed the suspension policy in our schools, K through 12, where under Virginia law, you could have suspended a kid for an entire year with no real obligation to looking at their needs, the totality of their needs, and try to meet those needs. So what has come out of the House is a 45-day limit with the possibility of extending it to another 45 days. But all of that is symbolic of really looking at the human mental health needs of our population, as well as then dealing with not only universal background check, and there it of course depends upon what's in that data, as we just saw in Florida, what wasn't recorded, as well as something I just never dawned on. It's easier to get a six-pack, you can't get a six-pack of beer, but you can get an AK-47? Excuse me, we've got a long way to go. But this is one where the other side definitely has thrown everything against the wall, and it's stuck for the last decade. And let's hope that we can turn it around, because we have a lot of makeup time to do on some of these issues. So while I respect what you're saying, Dave, about take our compromise now, or hopefully statewide, and again I come back to redistricting, hopefully the legislature will represent the statewide voice on this issue and not just the polarized pockets.
Can I just add to that? I think one of the things we're really trying as a group is to change language and semantics. I think they make a big difference. So we're trying, instead of saying it's gun control, we don't want to control
Hi, I just wanted to comment that one of the things we're really trying to do also with this conversation, making it, because it is a bipartisan issue, is that we're not talking about gun control, we're not taking things away from people, we're talking about gun safety. Right? We're not talking about lives that are lost, we're talking about lives of people that were killed. So I think that words do matter, and so maybe the more that we're trying to make this is a public health crisis, it's not a gun crisis. So the more we are trying to take it off of the gun and put it on to what we can do to just to keep our families and communities safe, and really, really want to thank all of you all for being huge proponents for getting that forward. Thanks.
And final comment? Okay, can you come up and? Yeah, well, she's had her hand raised for a while, so that's the only way. And then, so now if you want to talk, you can go to the
I work in a school, so I've learned to be an aggressive hand raiser from my students. My name is Maura, I live in the 42nd District, and I'm a mom of a 4-year-old and an employee of SCPS. I should state, because I think I have to according to my contract, that I don't speak as a representative of the public school system. I'm sharing my personal experiences here today. There were so many things I would have talked about at this town hall meeting were it not for what happened this week. And I'm sorry that I get very emotional, but it's hard to be a school employee and be the mom of a rising kindergartner. And actually, my husband works for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives and has to look at school shooting photos as part of his capacity there. And so this is like an emotional firestorm here. So thank you for Moms Demand Action for being here. I'm not a member of any of these groups, just a mom and a teacher who cares about this. And so I wrote one thing on Facebook this week that I want to share that I think is eminently important for you as state legislators, which is that I want to seriously talk about active shooter drills and lockdown drills in our schools. It is a state law that I believe legislators put in place after Sandy Hook that we have 4 lockdown drills annually in our school systems. If you have been through a lockdown drill, you may know that it's a traumatic thing. It's scary for our kids. It is terrifying for kids who have trauma, who have anxiety, and who have diagnosis related to emotional disturbance. These drills sometimes last longer than an hour, depending on how efficiently the administrators in the school are able to go through this theater of unlocking doors. Some administrators do it better than others. I've worked with one that did it quite dramatically and actually scolded a teacher for doing it wrong and made a gun sign and said, "Pow, pow, you're dead." It is dubious whether this kind of security theater actually will help children in the case of an attack like we saw happened at Parkland this week. The shooter there had been a student at the school. He had been through all of these drills for the past few years. He knew exactly what they would do. He knew exactly where the children would be, and he knew exactly what the risks were and where the weaknesses were. That's why he pulled a fire alarm. Running these drills 4 times a year doesn't make our schools safer. Like I say, it's security theater. It makes adults feel better because it feels like we're doing something, right? Let's hide the kids. An AR-15 can blow through a wooden door in this building in seconds. And the black piece of paper that we're intended to put over the windows only tells students at our schools that, hey, there's people in those windows, in those buildings, or those rooms, because we're not allowed to keep paper over the windows unless it's a lockdown drill. So that's just a clue to the shooter, hey, there's kids hiding in there. Let me use my AR-15. I'm also from Connecticut, so I actually it feels like all of us have 1 degree of separation now from school shooting victims, but I know people who were in Sandy Hook on the day of Sandy Hook. And so I'm sort of emotional about that as well. But I think it's a lie to say that nothing has happened since Sandy Hook, and I believe that the Connecticut legislature is a huge leader as far as that's concerned, and it shows that things can really change when state legislators are willing to step up and make a difference. And I want to just quote one thing from Mike Lawler, who's a former state legislator in Connecticut and the Undersecretary of Criminal Justice Policy there. he believes really strongly that what happened in Parkland this week would not have happened if it happened in Connecticut, because they have efficient laws there now that can prevent, in particular, people with mental illness from obtaining guns. For starters, AR-15s and large capacity magazines are banned altogether in Connecticut. And it's worth noting that this is a state where there are 4 manufacturers of AR-15s that are headquartered in the state. Of course, unlike Virginia, corporate contributions are banned in the state of Connecticut. So the legislators are not bought by the corporations there. So that's part of what's happening. You can't just walk into a gun dealer and pass a single NCIS background check in Connecticut. You can't buy a gun in a single day in Connecticut. It's really important to know that, and that's something that is doable with the will from the public to make it happen. In Connecticut, you need a license from the state police before you can purchase a weapon. To get such a license, you need to present yourself face-to-face with a law enforcement officer. If Connecticut law enforcement had information, as the Broward County Sheriff's Office did, in fact today it was released that the Broward County Sheriff had over 20 calls about that murderer, over 20 calls. It's not, people say, well, say something. A lot of people said something about this kid. So if the state police had information, they could make, at their own discretion, the decision that he was not appropriate for having a permit. And if they had information that he possessed firearms, they actually can obtain a risk warrant and remove those firearms. I'm also emotional about this because if this was the law in Virginia, gun deaths because of suicides could also be prevented. My brother died by suicide. He was a very responsible gun owner, an amazing leader, a great man, and he lived with bipolar disorder. And he was able to live a wonderful, productive, good life until he was 38 and his illness became destabilized. He was a hunter, very responsible man. He had a gun safe in the home. He went to all the gun safety things. He just got sick. And the day he was most sick, there was a weapon available and he died. But I know he didn't mean to die. He had a to-do list for that morning. But part of that illness is that you become destabilized and you have loss of impulse control. But we had informed authorities. We had talked to his doctors. We had him taken to the ER. The state police now could have the authority to remove his firearms from the home temporarily and require him to have a psych eval. If that had been in place in Connecticut, in Virginia, Creedeed's son might not be dead. We would have been able to remove the weapons from his home. So I think it's really important that, I understand none of this is going to pass this year, but if you step up and you say, this is possible and we demand it, we will get behind you and also say, we demand it. We will identify the people who won't do it and we'll get them out of office. So I just encourage you to be brave about this stuff, push forward loudly, even if you know it'll fail, and we'll get them on the record and we'll get them out of office. But I also want to throw back to my original point about the lockdown drills. I urge you to talk with school officials about lockdown drills. Even in my school, our administrators, some of our administrators share the concerns that they're not particularly effective. There's other things we can do other than force kids to sit passively and imagine their own deaths for 20 minutes to an hour, 4 times a year. But we don't have the authority to do so because the state legislature is mandating that we now have to do these 4 things. So that's something you guys could make a big difference with too. Thank you. I'm so sorry I'm long-winded. There's a lot. Sorry.